This is a hard one. Hello everyone, this will be my recap of the first season of Severance. Alright, let's go. The series follows Mark, who recently lost his wife, so he takes on a severance job. A severance job is basically a job where your memories at work are completely separate from your memories off of work. So a guy like Mark goes to work at Lumon, where he gets onto the elevator and from his perspective gets right off. And that means for him that the day is over. On the other hand, the innies, which are what the versions at work are called, they work all day, get onto the elevator, and then get right back off of it because they continue working. The work never stops, and they're essentially trapped at their work. Mark works in the macro data refinement, which from what I've gathered is them sort of mapping human emotions. But it looks like they stare at numbers all day and put them in folders. Anyways, Mark's innie best friend, Petey, quits unexpectedly, which means that Mark is promoted as the leader of his department. That also means that they have a new hire, a girl by the name of Helly, that Mark has to train. Helly does not want to be there, so she tries time and time again to escape from Lumon, the company they work at, and even tries to tell the outie version of herself that she does not want to be there. But the outie version of Helly is a complete menace who tells Helly that she's not a real person and she should just do what she's told. Luckily, that doesn't stop the innie version of Helly from trying to escape. And given that Mark is training the innie version of Helly, the two of them get really close throughout the season. And speaking of relationships, Irving, who is one of Mark's coworkers, develops a relationship with Bert G, who is the head of optics and design. But that relationship is cut short when Bert's outie retires. Now here's where things get really complicated, so ask questions if you have any. There's this guy by the name of Mr. Milchick who basically runs the floors. He basically makes sure that every team is doing what they're supposed to, and if they're not, they're punished accordingly. The punishment is known as the break room, where they're forced to repeat several lines over and over again. Anyways, Mr. Milchick answers to Mrs. Cobell, who is completely obsessed with the founder of the company, Keir Egan, and even she answers to the board of directors. The thing about Mr. Milchick and Mrs. Cobell is that they aren't severed, so they retain all the memories from them working. This is also interesting because Mrs. Cobell on the outside world goes by Mrs. Selvig and is actually Mark's neighbor. They also live in a neighborhood that seems completely devoid of life. Anyways, it seems like Mrs. Selvig, aka Mrs. Cobell, does this to keep tabs on Mark when he's not at work. And even though she was doing this to keep tabs on Mark, she misses the fact that Petey, an ex-severed employee, visits Mark. Petey then reveals to Mark that he was his innie's best friend, and that some very shady stuff is going down at Lumon. He then tells Mark that he has reintegrated himself and is on the run from Lumon. Reintegration is basically combining the two previously separated memories. But this takes a heavy toll on Petey and he dies shortly after. Rest in peace. Mark then answers Petey's phone and meets up with the rogue Lumon doctor that reintegrated Petey. But things go wrong and the doctor has to kill the head of securities at Lumon. She then takes his security card and gives it to Mark and tells him that the innie version of himself would know what to do. While this is happening, Mr. Milchick activates the overtime protocol on one of Mark's coworkers by the name of Dylan. The protocol is basically waking up one of the innies on the outside in case they stole some sensitive information. While this protocol was active, Dylan sees that he had a child, and now all he can think about is the outside life that he has with this kid. Mark and his team then come up with a plan to activate overtime for themselves to see what's going on the outside world. But to do so, one person needs to stay behind at the office and activate the machine, and Dylan volunteers to be that person. And the plan goes exactly as expected. Mark, Helly, and Irving wake up on the outside and discover their outside lives. Mark is at a party with his pregnant sister Devin, and he discovers two things. The first is that Mrs. Selvig is at the party and is pretending to be nice. The second thing is that he discovers that the outside version of Mark has a wife that everybody believes is dead. But that wife is actually Miss Casey, their wellness director, who is very much alive and was just sent to what seems to be the dungeon at Lumon. Irving discovers that the outie version of himself constantly paints a dark hall with an elevator going down. He also finds out that he has a map with the locations of severed employees, including Bert G. So he rushes over to Bert's house. Helly discovers that the outie version of herself is Helena Egan, a descendant of the founder of Lumon, and that Helly is actually a project in order to market Severance. And she's actually at a party to announce how great Helly was. That's sick and twisted. The season then comes to an end with 3 cliffhangers. The first is that Helly tells everyone at that party that her life is hell and Severance sucks. The second is that Irving bangs on Bert's door after finding out that he's happily married. And the third is that Mark tells his sister all about what's happening in Lumon, and then discovers that Mark's wife is actually Miss Casey and rushes out to tell her, and right as he says she's alive, Mr. Milchick tackles Dylan and overtime ends. And yeah, I hope I answered all of your questions, but if I didn't, be sure to leave a comment. I read them all. And if you like that video and want to see more like it, leave a like and subscribe. I really appreciate it. And if you like Severance, you may like this show right here. That's it.